Esther 5, 7 through 14. Then answered Esther and said, My petition, my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if he please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them. And I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. Then went Haman forth that day with joyful and with glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. And Haman said, Moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king into the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. 6 million Jews killed in World War II alone. Persecution and murder of Jews from Egypt to Babylon to Rome in AD 70 throughout the 1870 years until they became a nation again in 1948. 3 wars, 1948, 1967, and 1973, where their enemies tried to destroy them. That's the history of the Jews. Now the threats against them continue, and anti-Semitism continues to grow each week, it seems. Why? Such hatred for the Jews. The ungodly hatred of the Jews. Here's why I want us to see this hatred of the Jews. Verse 10. Verse 10, chapter 5. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. Now, when Haman saw Mordecai, his joy was tempered in the king's gate, because he stood not up nor moved for him. He was full of indignation against Mordecai. But he refrained himself in verse 10. But when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. And listen to this, arrogant. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Verse 12, Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did not let man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. She prepared it for me. And tomorrow I am invited unto also with the king. So he's going to be honored. He thinks it's him. Verse 13, he's been invited to a banquet, so he assumes in his arrogance and pride that it's for him. Verse 13, Yet all this avails me nothing as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Well, in Esther chapter 5, he hated the Jews so much, Mordecai especially, that he didn't care what kind of celebration was going on. I'm still miserable as long as there's a Jew sitting at the king's gate. This world today is miserable as long as there's a Jew in Jerusalem and in Israel. This world cannot stand it. They have the same attitude of of Haman. The Haman attitude exists today in this world. That's what this message is all about. The Haman attitude is in the world today. The pride, the arrogance of people who hate the Jews for no good reason but their own pride. Because Israel will not bow to the Islamic nations of the world. Israel will not bow to the European Union. Israel will not bow to Russia, and Israel won't bow to the United States. That's what angered our past president. They would not give in to him. And they hate Israel for no good cause. Because Mordecai would not honor the wickedness of Haman and this false, wicked bunch of people, which could stand for the Muslim world today. Haman and the Amalekites could be representative of the Muslim world, where Israel will not bow to these false teachers and false preachers and false religions. They will not. And should they? No. But we in America have kowtowed to them, scared to death of them. There is an invasion of America going on right now, as we speak, and an invasion of Europe, of young refugees, young men who are refugees coming over here without family, without children. They're not refugees. It's an invasion. It's an invasion. It's a great tactic. Get the world to accept you and feel like you're refugees. How come 99% of the refugees are young men and no Christians are coming? It's an Islamic invasion. And we are so stupid to let them come in. And Europe is just about to throw their hands up and quit. They are so ignorant. If they had read the book of Esther and realized the unreasonableness of Haman, which is Islam, totally unreasonable, totally foolish, childlike in behavior. When I think of Islam, I think of little children fighting over their toys. I do. Little immature people, little minds, no hearts, infants, wanting their own way. Yet all this availeth me nothing as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Islam says nothing. I don't care how much land we have, how much oil we have. Nothing satisfies us until we have Israel. Until Israel's cast into the Mediterranean Sea. That's what Iran has said. They've said that hundreds of times. They say it every day. And we say, oh, they don't mean it. They don't mean it. It's just saber rattling. Is it really? We'll show you that it, by this passage, this scripture, that it is not saber rattling. In this next verse, then verse 14, then said Jairus, his wife, and all his friends. You know, when a man goes home and whines to his wife, we all do it, fellas. There's nothing more pitiful. I hate to use the word sickening, but come on. Don't let your wife do your dirty deeds for you. Would you call in? I can't call in work sick. Would you call in for me? It reminds me of Jezebel and Naboth's vineyard. Remember, Ahab wanted Naboth's vineyard, and he whined to his wife, I've got all these other, I want Naboth's vineyard. A grown man, king, crying to his wife, oh, I'll get it for you, honey. And Jezebel killed Naboth and got it for him. That's some wife. I mean, she'll get it done for you. And she had a nice end, didn't she? Jairus, his wife, isn't going to have much better ending, but my goodness. She's behind all this, promoting her husband. Behind every great man, there's a great woman pushing him. Behind every evil man, there's a more evil woman pushing him. Believe me, there's evil women behind some of these men. Don't you think they're not? So she says, now she's the one that recommended the gallows, wasn't she? And she recommended it be made 50 cubits high. 50 times 18. That's 18 inches as a cubit. That's 75 feet high. Isn't that a little bit overkill for a gallows? Why, his head would come off if you drop that far. Let it be made 50 cubits high. And tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Now there she is. And all his friends. This is what Israel wants, or Islam wants to do to Israel. Hang them as high as you can. Overkill. Destroy them, every last one. Who in World War II had a plot to destroy the Jews? Hitler. And that plot was backed really by the Grand Mufti of the Islamic world at that time. I can't remember his name and all the details, but Yasser Arafat's daddy had a part in it, of the extermination of the Jews. It wasn't just Hitler's plan. I mean, Hitler went along with it, but it was the plan of the Grand Mufti to destroy all the Jews. And they found their man in Hitler. Haman is still alive. He has not died. His spirit goes on, not literally, but his hatred of the Jews and overkill of the Jews. Oh, if they could just get their hands on them. Well, they almost did. 6 million Jews were killed. And in God's providence, that was the greatest slaughter of Jews in history, but it also turned out to lead to the creation of the state of Israel and the sign of the last of the last days, the greatest sign of the last days. The race is on, boys and girls. When Israel became a nation, a nation made in a day, the race for the Antichrist and the tribulation is on. Then go thou in merrily unto the king and to the banquet. Oh, they're so happy that they're going to kill this Jew and kill all the rest of them. This thing pleased Haman and caused the gallows to be made. Islam has ISIS and the other factions of Islamic world, the Shiites and the whatever else they're called, Shiites and the Sunni Muslims. Thank you. And they have one thing in common, is they hate the Jews. So Haman is honored and happy to be honored, but he cannot stand Mordecai and the Jews. Nothing will satisfy the world until every Jew is destroyed. You know that, don't you? That's why there'll never be peace in this world. As long as one Jew lives, there'll never be peace. The devil will see to it. Haman exists today. The Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want dead Jews. The Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want Israel destroyed. We cannot appease the Arabs as long as Jews exist. We cannot have peace as long as the Jews exist. There's 12 million in the world. That 12 million keeps the world from having peace. The 6 or 7 billion. Jack, that's just a drop in the bucket. Why don't they just ignore them? Why didn't Haman ignore Mordecai, one Jew? Pride, arrogance. With Israel there, it represents a slap in their face. They will not bow, like Mordecai would not bow to Haman. Israel will not bow, as we said earlier, and that is a slap in their face. And they're determined to get rid of them. Haman wants a gallows built to hang Mordecai upon. The world wants to make Jews a public display. Wants to make the Jews a public display, and not just kill them, but humiliate them. Jew haters not only are only happy when they think they're killing Jews. But we're supposed to be a civilized society. But man's heart is wicked, and evil men shall wax worster and worster. Aren't we supposed to be civilized? If evolution is so true, then why aren't we more civilized? Why do we have ISIS? Why do we have hatred? Why do we have Muslims killing people and killing women and making the world suffer? Man's heart is wicked, and evil men shall wax worse and worse. There's no hope for man loving other men as long as Jews exist. And Satan hates them. Satan will always try to destroy them. Unreasonable hatred. And it's never going to stop. It's only going to get worse. Read the book of Revelation. The second part of the tribulation, I believe that the Antichrist turns his wrath upon Israel. And they flee to Petra. That's who he turns his wrath upon. One last time, Satan says, I'll get them now, and I'll run them out of there. I'll destroy them, every one, and Jesus will not be able to rule and reign. In his arrogance, he thinks he can do that. Arrogance. There we go back to that word. Pride and arrogance. The epitome of that is Satan. There are only 12 million Jews in the world, about the size of Houston, Texas. That's it. But the world acts like there's 12 billion. The world acts like they're in everything. Well, they are, because God has made it that way. It's uncanny, isn't it? But here it is right in the Bible, an example of Jew hating back then that is unchanged today. Well, God intervenes. Look at Esther chapter 6, verses 1, 2, and 3. On that night, this is Esther 6, 1, 2, and 3. Here's how God intervenes. On that night, the king could not sleep. Could not the king sleep? And he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains and keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. God intervened in two ways. First, he caused the king to have a sleepless night. God can do that. God caused the king to want to read the Chronicles of the kingdom. He saw where Mordecai had not been honored for foiling a plot to kill the king. Mordecai had not been properly honored. Esther 7. Turn to Esther 7, verse 3. Then Esther, the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, to perish. But if we had been sold to bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? Verse 6, And Esther said, The adversary and the enemy is the wicked Haman. Busted. Now, this is at the banquet. The big banquet. Esther makes this announcement. And Esther was a good person. Esther, the queen here, a wonderful person, a hero. Behind the scenes, sort of. For she saw... verse 7. Well, let's look at verse 6. And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. The Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. That's Islam. When they know they're beat, they're going to turn tail and run. When they know they're going to be up against somebody that's not afraid of them, they're going to turn tail and run. All we have to do as a nation is have a president that'll say, Boo! I ain't moving. Boo! Boogie to boogie. And point all his guns at him, and they're going to run. What do? They kill people with bombs strapped to them. They won't fight you face to face. They use surprise, and they call it terrorism. It's actually not terrorism, it's cowardism. Killing women and children. What man would sign up to be in an army like that? We're training you to kill and fight for Islam, and you're going to kill women and children. Are you sure? How tough do I have to be to do that? Yeah, I don't train. Go smoke a cigarette. Go have a drink. Go find some prostitutes. You don't need to train for that. Just slap on a bomb. Really. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen, and the king, arising from the banquet of wine, in his wrath went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Duh. Verse 8, Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen. Now listen to this. Now read this. Now God intervened in two ways. He caused the king to have a sleepless night. Okay, here's the second way God intervened. And Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Second way God intervened, he caused Haman to trip and fall on the king while pleading for his life, and the king thought he was trying to force himself upon her. And he didn't even put him on trial. He whisked him out to the gallows immediately and hung him 75 feet in the air. God is going to foil every attempt to destroy his people. God caused all that to happen. God will foil every attempt to destroy his people. God is going to intervene and destroy the enemies who come down from the north to destroy Israel. You can mark it down. They're coming. They're going to see an advantage. After the rapture of the church, they're going to see a weakness in America. And Trump is gone. The last Trump. Well, I hope he's raptured. If he's not, he's going to be very powerless. And Israel, they're going to take advantage of that because they take advantage of opportunity. And you can mark it down. They're going to come from the north, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39, and try to destroy Israel with Russia and Iran. All the threats and promises to destroy God's people are going to see the wrath of God poured out on them, and that'll be the end of Islam. That'll be it. God's had enough. And he says he's going to put an end to it. He's going to pour out his wrath upon the enemies who come against Israel, his people. God will destroy them. Not the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, but it's going to be God, the Bible tells us. The ungodly hatred of the Jews continues in modern day Hamans. It continues today. Unreasonable hatred of the Jews. Just as unreasonable as this guy was. Because Mordecai would not bow to him. Mordecai probably didn't see him. Mordecai probably didn't realize who he was. Mordecai may have said, I won't bow to you if I did know who you were, which is probably what happened. And because of the arrogance and hatred of Haman, he wanted all the Jews killed. It makes as much sense as today's hatred of Israel. It just is pride and arrogance that has caused the world to hate the Jews. But you know, God has His Esthers today and His Mordecai standing by to play their role in the salvation of His people. But the Mordecai of today, the Esther of today, is God. He's going to be the defender of His people. He defended them in 1948 when they were attacked. Immediately after becoming a nation, they were attacked by the Arab nations and beat them. President Truman was asleep, and no, it's 1967. It was President Johnson. No, the one that said, I am not a crook. Nixon. But Johnson was president in 67. No, 73. Was Nixon president in 73? That was it. Golda Meir was the prime minister. And remember that sneak attack on Yom Kippur? And the president, Golda Meir called the president at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, Mr. President, they have Golda Meir called the president and said, we don't have we need some stuff immediately. They're going to attack us. She found out about an imminent attack. We need some weapons and stuff. And Nixon said, remembered what his mother had told him when he was little, anytime you have a chance to help Israel, you must do it. As a little boy, he was told that. His mother loved Israel and the Jews and taught him as a boy. And he immediately said yes. He called his generals and said, whatever they need, get it to them ASAP. And we got weapons to them that saved them from the attack by the Arabs. That's the last time they were attacked, except by the Scud missiles of Saddam Hussein. And we would not let them retaliate. Remember when the world said, refrain, refrain. Remember when they were launching Scud missiles every day into Israel? Saddam Hussein and the world said, now just calm down. But no, people expect Israel, because they don't respect them, because they really don't care. They really think Israel's just there temporarily. They really think Israel's just on borrowed time. That's why they think they won't let Israel fight. They just don't respect them. They just think, it makes everybody mad if you do anything in Israel. It does. Why does the world care about 12 million people? Actually, 6 million there. Why does the world care? But everybody gets upset. Everybody gets upset over Israel. If they blew up Cincinnati tomorrow, nobody's going to care. The world's not going to be upset and say, oh, we've got trouble here. You mess with Jerusalem, you just want to move an embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and everybody says, whoa, you can't do that. Well, it's our business with Israel. It's Israel's business. Jerusalem's an international city. Well, they call New York an international city, but it's our city. Ain't nobody come another nation going to tell us what to do. But Jerusalem, everybody says they have a piece of it. It's just not fair. It's not right. It's the Hamanism. That's what we ought to call it, Hamanism. People unjust hatred of the Jews, unreasonable hatred of the Jews. But God will have His revenge. And He will have His way. And He's going to have His people with Him to rule and reign for 1,000 years. He's going to make it up to the people of Israel and the Jews. For 1,000 years. He's going to let them reign. Remember what Hitler said? The Third Reich will last 1,000 years. That was a prophecy that he didn't know he was making. That the Jews he tried to kill will live 1,000 years. See how God works to save His people and protect His people. It is God who is the Savior of Israel. And we need to always love Israel. We don't have to love their politics. They're in there in unbelief. We don't have to love their religion. But we have to love the land and realize that's God's land. We're going to be there one day. We're going to help Him rule and reign from there. We respect that land. We love that land. It's Bible land. The Word of God. Jesus walked there. That's why we love Israel. That's why we love the Jews. They wrote the Bible. They gave us. Jesus Christ was a Jew. We love these people. What would we be without the Jews? Where would we be if God had not worked through a people to bring light to this world? God gave light to the world. Then He gave light to the world through a people, the Jews. Then He became the light of the world through Jesus Christ. Amen and amen.